Square.
Baruch Hashem and Baruch Habayim. Welcome to our advanced studies here at Congregation Mashiach Yisrael. My name is Scott Siskin, and tonight we're going to be studying our beloved Tanya, Perek Mem Chet, chapter 48. Mi yiftach otana b'tafila uvracha. Who would like to open us with prayer and a blessing?
Give me a second.
Oh yes, please.
Yes.
I believe this is the prayer from the new translation by the Kabbalah Center of the Zohar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's beautiful.
Yes.
Ruler of the universe, master of all masters, the Father of mercy and forgiveness, we thank you, our God and the God of our fathers, for bowing down and kneeling that you brought us closer to your Torah and your holy word. And you enable us to take part in the secrets of your holy Torah. How worthy are we that you grant us such big favor. That is the reason we plead before you. I need to turn this way so I can read it. No, it's not going to go. We plead before you that you will forgive and acquit all our sins, and that they should not bring separation between you and us. And may it be your will before you, our God and the God of our fathers, that you will awaken and prepare our hearts to love and revere you. And may you listen to our utterances and open our closed heart to the hidden studies of your Torah. And may our study be pleasant before your place of honor, as the aroma of sweet incense. And may you emanate to us light from the source of our soul to all our being. And may the sparks of your holy servants, through which you revealed your wisdom to the world, shine. May their merit and the merit of their fathers and the merit of their Torah and holiness support us, so that we shall not stumble through your study. And by their merit enlighten our eyes in your learning, as it is stated by King David, the sweet singer of Israel. Open my eyes, so that I will see the wonders from your Torah. And that's Tehillim 119:18. Because from his mouth God gives wisdom and understanding. May the utterances of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, God, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen.
Amen. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
We should do that every week.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Baruch Hashem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us and betrothed us with his commandments and calls us to engage in the study of his word.
Amen.
So tonight we're on chapter 48. As a little bit of an intro, recap, I guess you could say, chapter 48 is coming at the tail end of a long series, a marathon of 10 chapters of love and fear. I don't know if you can see it behind me or not, but our handy-dandy map of Tanya here. In the light blue section, this is our marathon of love and fear. The Alter Rebbe is giving us different tips and clues and hints and methodologies and parables and all kinds of things to help us to be able to awaken the love for God that we have within our hearts, from a concealed state where we can't see it, it's just innate, to a revealed state where it's flaming and firing like burning coals. So we've been coming over the last couple of chapters, and again, the Alter Rebbe first described to us what is love, what is fear, what is the lower love, what is the higher love, what is the lower fear, what is the higher fear. In short, everything begins with the lower fear, which is ol Kabbalat ol Malchut Shemayim, the acceptance or the receival of the yoke of heaven. That's how it all starts, the lower fear. We have to understand God as boss, and as such we're going to do what he says. Then it can progress to the lower love, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam is love of the world. We can see the world around us, and we can see all of the different facets of how God is great quantitatively and qualitatively, and as such, we recognize that all good things in creation, all pleasures and delights of creation, are coming essentially from God and from godliness. And as such, when we connect to God, we can be accessing all of the pleasures of this creation, all the good things in the world. So that's a great reason to love God. Again, it's self-focused, but if everybody would do that, how great would the world be, right? Then we talked about the higher love. The higher love is called Ahava B'Tanugim, or Ahava Rabbah, the great love. This is a gift that's given to special holy people after they've perfected their fear of God. And it's a reward type love. You love God because of who he is alone, not because of any selfish motivation whatsoever, totally altruistic. And as such, it's actually a reward. So that's why we don't really usually experience it in this world, because this is the world where we work. Next world is the world where we reap our reward, or pick our fruit that we sowed our seeds for. Then there's the higher fear, Yira Ilah, and this is perfecting our service of God in such a way that we can't even say that we're afraid of God anymore, but it's more sublime. We're in awe of God. We respect him so much for who he is that we feel almost ashamed to just be in his presence And we appreciate the opportunity to do whatever it is that he says. And that's, again, focused on him, not so much on us. So that's what we talked about before, and then the Alter Rebbe gave us all kinds of methodologies by which we would be able to awaken these feelings of love and fear. Remember, we talked about Ahavat Olam. The lower love happens when we think about God. That's why it's called Ahavat Olam, the love of the world. When you look at creation, I mean, we're in springtime now, Baruch Hashem, we can see the flowers are blooming and the animals are chirping and building nests and all kinds of things are happening, and we could say, how awesome is God? You know, he directs every aspect of creation. We said earlier that the Talmud says there's not a blade of grass that God doesn't send an angel to strike it and tell it to grow. There's not a leaf that doesn't turn over in the wind without God's express command to do so. So we can see how God's controlling every aspect of creation. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's easy for us to awaken a love of God in that realm. And then we talked about another kind of love, the love that was awakened, or the love that is paradigmatic, I guess you could say, of Yaakov Avinu, our father Jacob. Remember that love? Anybody have a word or two on that? What was Jacob's method? We know that Abraham is chesed, he's loving kindness. We know that Yitzchak Avinu, our father Isaac, he's gevura. He serves God primarily through fear. What about Jacob?
Jacob was like invisible. He was selfless.
They were all pretty selfless. They're all chariots to God, right?
Yeah.
What about Jacob? If Abraham is chesed, the Ma'ariv prayer? Okay, we're getting somewhere. If Abraham is chesed, which is shacharit, the morning prayer, and Isaac is gevura, the afternoon prayer, as it says when Rebecca, our mother, she found Isaac, he was praying midday, right? And Jacob laid his head down at night. Mincha prayer, right. So if Abraham's chesed and Isaac is gevura, then Jacob must be tiferet, right? So if Abraham is kindness, paradigmatic of kindness, and then Isaac is paradigmatic of fear or discipline or severity or judgment, then therefore Jacob is paradigmatic of compassion, rachamim, right? Which is why when he saw Rachel, as we discussed a few chapters ago, when he first saw Rachel Imenu, our mother Rachel, what did he do? He knows that she's the primary matriarch of the Jewish people, right? Rachel Imenu, our mother Rachel, she's the classic Yiddish mama, right? So what happens when Yaakov Avinu, who represents supernal compassion, meets Rachel Imenu?
Did he weep?
He cried. What did he do then?
Kissed her.
Then he kissed her, right? Mm-hmm. This is how Jacob is putting the compassion together with the Jewish people. God, he says to God, this is going to be the Jewish people. I see what they're going to go through. God, please bring them abundant compassion, which is symbolic of weeping, right? What happens when we weep? We have an emotion that's beyond the level we can control. It bubbles over our little lids here, right? And so he wept because he is compassionate. He wanted an overwhelming and overflowing of compassion on the Jewish people. And then that God should connect to the Jewish people, hence the kissing, right? So this is Jacob's kind of love. And we talked about if we can be compassionate towards God, how do we be compassionate towards God? By recognizing all the stuff that he does for us, right? God took us out of Egypt, and he takes us out of our own personal Egypt every day. That was last week's chapter. And as such, how much more should I do for God, right? As water reflects the face, as King Solomon says. So also I should be in love with God, right? Because he's done so much for me, wherever I came from, whatever my shtick is, right? So that brings us up to chapter 48. Chapter 48, we're going to take a little bit of a detour here, and we're going to talk about a Kabbalistic concept called tzimtzum, tzimtzumim. Tzimtzum is translated essentially as contraction, filtering, curtaining, concealing. And it's all about how God limits, contracts, curtains, and conceals and filters and refines his godly infinite energy to be able to trickle, so to speak, down into our world so that we should be able to receive it, and it should not overwhelm us and blow us up, right? We don't want to go pop. So that's essentially it. The title of our chapter 48 for tonight from our handy-dandy map of Tanya is Tzimtzum. And in English, I guess you could spell that Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum. Which, Tzimtzumim, if you like, okay. Let's start with one. Tzimtzum, from infinite to finite. That's the chapter title based on our beloved map of Tanya. And a short summary when you're ready. Made a bracha earlier.
Ooh. From infinite to finite.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay. To create finite worlds God contracted his infinite light through the process of Tzimtzum. To create finite worlds, God contracted his infinite light through the process we call Tzimtzum. Gosh? Very good. So we're on page...
And even the word contraction is
limit, filter, reduce, not so much, right?
Yeah,
hide.
It's more of a concealment.
Conceal is a fine word for Tzimtzum.
But we talked about his moving aside to create a vacuum, and it's a picture that's not to be taken completely literally.
Right. No, definitely not. And in fact, you're touching on something that's very heavy, and we're not going to go that deep tonight.
Oh.
In the Arizal's doctrine of Tzimtzumim, the Arizal, the famous Kabbalist that came after the Ramach, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, blessed memory, he had given a discourse on what is Tzimtzum, this doctrine of Tzimtzum. And again, the Arizal, like the Baal Shem Tov, he didn't write anything. I mean, he was only here teaching for 2-3 years. So it was his students, like Rabbi Chaim Vital, who wrote down the stuff that he said. So some of the writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital had said that during the doctrine of Tzimtzumim, that the Arizal said that God had to make a vacuum, so to speak, by which he could implant his energy into. And in this way...
Since he was everything.
Because God is everything. Right. He is everywhere, as we'll discuss. And I know this is a lot, but just to address your question real quick. There's lots of people who think that's literal, right? God is here and not there, or there and not here, which of course goes against what the teaching of the Bible says. God says in the Bible, in the prophets, do I not fill all the heavens and earth? Right? So that means he's everywhere. There can't be a concept of a vacuum when God exists. Which is why Chabad, other Chassidic movements, through the Baal Shem Tov, say very specifically that concept of God makes a vacuum in this process of Tzimtzum before he creates cannot be taken literally. You're absolutely right. We're not going that deep tonight. Tonight we're just going to talk about the general concept of Tzimtzum.
But
what is Tzimtzum?
When we translate it as contraction, that's what it implies, and that's why I brought it up.
Right, because you say concealment's a better word.
Concealment, I think.
Fact of the matter is, it's a two-found concealment contraction, right? On the one hand, God filters himself, so the quality of godly energy, God's infinite energy we're getting is less. And on the other hand, it's quantitative as well. So we get less of it. We get less of an energy that is now weaker than it once was. That's Tzimtzum, both facets, quantity and quality, as we'll see. Any other questions before we start? All right, let's do it. By contemplating on the greatness of the Ein Sof Yisborach, just before we begin, what is Ein Sof? We've been saying it all along.
The infinite one.
Yeah, what's it literally mean? Ein?
Let me see. Ein Sof is
Ein,
without end.
Ein Sof means without end. Absolutely right. Ein Sof means there is no Sof, end, or Kates as we'll soon see. So we call God the infinite one. This is a problem, right? If God wants to create a finite world, how is he supposed to do that? And this is another thing that a lot of people, they don't seem to realize, and they kind of divorce God from creation in this sense, unbeknownst, I'm sure, because we can't fathom how an infinite God could be able to control finite stuff. We say, God in the heavens and the infinite stuff, yeah, then God is doing infinite stuff, but when it comes down to me and my hot dog, does he really care? Right? The fact of the matter is, infinite means everything.
Be a kosher.
Yeah, as it turns out, he does care, right? And that's amazing. That takes a certain amount of faith, right? To believe that God created the world, I think there's enough proof today that we could see that God obviously created the world. To believe that God cares about what kind of hot dog I eat, that's faith, right? So, contemplate.
That's love.
Faith, love, same.
Well, the point is he gives the examples or the words that we use here.
Right.
A mother
Bible's
cares
written in the
about
language of
every little detail of her child's life.
Of course.
Would she care what hot dog the child ate or what food? Every little detail,
right,
to protect, to love, to guide, to teach that child.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much God loves us, that he does the same exact thing.
Absolutely. We have good Yiddish mamas out there who care about everything that their children eat, right? Just like me during the Passover holiday here, where I was dipping my finger into the matzo ball soup and putting it in the little baby's mouth. And mom's like, don't do that. She's just a baby. It's like, it's just matzo ball soup. It's like, she's a baby. So.
She's got to learn sometime.
She's not a baby. She's an infant.
Infant. Sorry.
There's a difference.
She's quite young.
They're not allowed to eat nothing yet.
She loved
did
it.
like it. No, you
Sorry.
can't do any of that yet.
You
All right.
got to strain out all that chicken.
No salt.
All right.
No.
Contemplating on the greatness of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, the Infinite One, blessed be He, the intelligent person will realize that as his name indicates, what's his name? Ein Sof, without end. So is he. So is he. There is no end or limit or finitude at all to the light and the vitality that diffuse from him, may he be blessed, by his simple will. Simple will here, the footnote says uncaused, right? We say in the Patach Eliyahu, in Elijah's prayer, that God is a cause of all causes and the producer of all effects, right? That's what we mean God's simple will. And which is united with his essence and being, right? We've been saying all along that God's wisdom is this Torah, God's will are the mitzvot, God's wisdom and will are one with him. God and the Torah are one, right? Fundamental concept.
His essence and being in perfect unity.
Right. It's who he is. In perfect unity. Had the worlds descended from the light of the holiness of the Ein Sof Yisbarach without tzimtzumim, without contractions, without concealments, if God just flooded the world with all his infinite energy, what would happen? You think about it?
It wouldn't look like it does.
It would not look like it does. That's very true. Very true. I got something wrong. Okay.
No, I didn't. I'm just searching.
Where are we here? Had the worlds descended from the light of the holiness of the Ein Sof Yisbarach without contractions, but according to a gradual descent from grade to grade by means of cause and effect, this world would not, in such a case, have ever been created in its present form in a finite and limited order, right? You can't go from infinite level to infinite level to infinite level to infinite level and somehow eventually end up at finite. It doesn't work that way, right? There's got to be something else that has to take place. So now we have a famous teaching from the Talmud, albeit confusing teaching. The Talmud says, gives us an example. If you wanted to climb up to heaven, right? If you wanted to walk to heaven, if you could find the road, right? How long would it take? How long would it take to get there?
500 years.
They say if you were walking and you found the road, it would take 500 years to get there. 500 years, which again is kind of confusing and strange for us to say that, right? Because we don't know where the road is.
And we don't have 500 years.
And we don't have 500 years. Similarly, says the Talmud, between heaven and heaven, between the rakia, between one firmament and the next firmament, between heaven 1 and heaven 2, another 500 years. And also the diameter of each heaven, in between each heaven, another 500 years. And then it says the feet of the chayot, the feet of the chayot, the Michael and Gabriel, these angels with the 4 faces and the wings, and they're holding up God's throne. Remember the chariot, right? The feet of these holy creatures themselves, another 500 years. And the legs themselves, it's equal to everything else that's been before. Keneged Kula. So we're talking huge, huge stuff here, right? And similarly between each heaven and heaven, also the diameter of each heaven. Even the world to come in the higher Garden of Eden, the habitation of the souls of the great tzaddikim and the souls themselves, needless to add the angels, are all in the realms of bounds and limitation. For there is a limit to their apprehension of the light of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, blessed be He, which comes to them through the as it's being clothed in Chabad. I want to stop for a second and just comment here. So this is really weird, right? We say 500 years from heaven to heaven, 500 years from here to heaven, 500 years for the feet of the Chayot. What's going on here? And ultimately the purpose here is not to tell us how to get to heaven, which reminds me of a fun joke. I think I thought of it earlier. There is a new person in town. He was a religious leader of a different faith system. And he's going down the street. He's looking for the post office. He finds a nice little Jewish boy with a tzitzis flapping, running by. It's like, excuse me, little boy. Can you tell me which way is the post office? I'm looking for the post office. Oh, he's like, oh, it's fine. It's 2 blocks down that way and 1 block to the right. He's like, oh, thank you very much, young sir. I very much appreciate it. And by the way, says this new religious leader in town, if you ever need to know the way to heaven, please come and talk to me, and I'll show you the way to heaven. He's like, with all due respect, sir, if you can't find your way to the post office, It's a bad joke. Maybe a bad joke.
Oh, good joke.
But so let's say you could find the way, right? It's not telling us how to walk to heaven. It's saying that it takes 500 years. They put a number on there specifically. Not 499, not 501. You don't need 501 years if you found the road, right? And 499 years isn't enough, which means that the heavens, the firmament themselves, the heavens themselves, between heaven 1 and heaven 2, even the feet of the gigantic chayot, these holy creatures that hold up God's throne, it's all finite. It's huge, but it's limited. It's finite. It's not infinite, right? The feet of the chayot, or the heavens themselves, are not all expansive and infinite. There's a limit. There's a boundary. There's a limitation, which is exactly what it says here. All are in the realm of bounds and limitation.
Everything below God is finite.
Is finite, right? Finite. Because God created them, and he created finite creation. Absolutely right.
Or Ein Sof, which is a better term.
Infinite,
Uses.
right? Without it. So how are they finite? Remember, there is no necessary space in heaven, right? Space and time are a product of Malchut, of this world of Asiya. So how do we have space in heaven? How can you say the feet of the Chayot are so long and not so long? Because there's a limit to their apprehension of the light of the Infinite One, blessed be He, which shines on them through by being clothed in Chabad. What is Chabad? Chochma, Bina, Vadat. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So the creatures, lofty as they are, holy as they are, right? We say every morning in our prayers, Kulam Barurim, Kulam Gadolim, Kulam Giborim, Kulam Kadoshim. They're all holy, they're all strong, they're all amazing, right? But God chose us. Even them are limited into the understanding that they can understand their Creator, right? Which makes them limited beings, not infinite beings. That's the point that's trying to be brought out here. Kosh? Hence, there's also a boundary to their enjoyment derived from the splendor of the Shekhinah, of God's divine presence, and to their pleasure in the light of God, for they cannot absorb enjoyment and delight of an infinite order without being nullified out of their existence and returned to their source. This is why we need Tzimtzum. Makes sense? We can close the book now. We need Tzimtzum because if God were to shower us with infinite energy, we would not be able to tolerate it. It would appear to us as something painful, right? Not good. Imagine the light of the sun, right? The light of the sun helps us, and it makes the trees grow, and it warms us up, and it gives us a nice tan if we're into that kind of thing. And what happens if you're standing right in the sun and you're looking right at the bright sun? It's blinding, right? What happens if you stay out in the sun too long? You get lobstery, right? So it's helpful to us. The sun's rays and the sun's energy is helpful to us because it's limited, because it's finite. Reminds you of another joke. So the guy says, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take a trip to the sun. I want to go stand on the sun and see what it's like. And this guy says, you idiot, how are you supposed to go to the sun? Do you know how hot it is? I know how much fire there is? You know how bright it is? He's like, you're the idiot. I'm going to go at night. So you can't stand on the sun. It's too much energy. We can't tolerate it, right? It would feel bad to us. It would not feel good. Parenthetically, this is what we call a blessing in disguise, right? When we have things that happen to us, we have this famous phrase, Gamzu Latova, right? This is also for good. We say, this is good. You look at the flat tire and like, Baruch Hashem, this is good, right? We're trying to struggle to figure out how it's good. It's good because we understand that it's good, not because we feel that it's good. Why don't we feel that it's good? Why don't we feel that flat tires are good?
Because we can only see the flat tire. We can't see the whole purpose around it.
Exactly.
It takes effort and sweat to fix it.
Right? That sounds rough to me,
More
right?
money to have somebody else do it.
Oh, don't
for
even
you.
start talking about money, right? So, what's limited there? Right on the top of this page. Chabad. Our Chabad is limited. Our wisdom, our understanding is knowledge. And our knowledge is limited in that sense. Because we don't see, like you said, everything that's happening because of the flat tire. We don't see God's choice in making us have the flat tire. To us, it seems painful, right? Because we are experiencing a higher level of good that we are not yet ready to tolerate because our wisdom and understanding and knowledge are not set right. As such, it feels painful. It feels like, oh, why is this happening, right? Or like the series says, when you take a wrong turn, it's like recalculating course, detour, 248 miles. Oh, man, right? So, anyways. So what would happen if God opened the floodgates and he let shine upon us his infinite life-giving light and energy, we'd fry up like if we stood on the sun. And that's a weak example, right? God's much more powerful than the sun. All the suns combined, right? All the stars combined.
It says you can't live and see God.
Right. That's why, that's a perfect example. I'm glad that you brought it up. So Moses says, right, he's talking to God. God, will you please forgive the Jewish people? I know that this whole golden calf thing, it's a mess, but we're going to get past it. Everything's going to be fine, right? The Yiddish Mama, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And God says, you're right, you're absolutely right. I forgive the people, I'll go with you. And Moshe Rabbeinu sees the getting is good, so he says, can I see your face? Right? And he says,
slips it in real quiet.
Yeah, right? Says, Moshe, my little Moshe. No one can see my face and live. Right? What does that mean? He wanted to see God's infinite chesed, God's infinite light. If we were to do that, what would happen to him? Look what it says right here. He would be nullified out of existence and returned to his source. For God to keep us here, yesh me'ayin, we talked about this term. What's yesh me'ayin? Creatio ex nihilo, or briat yesh me'ayin, creating something from nothing. Right? Everything comes from God and God's energy. But before God creates it, it looks like it's nothing. It looks like it's not here. So if you're going to be overwhelmed with that godly energy, then you're not going to be here. You're going to look like you're not here. Kosh?
Kosh.
And this is what happens with the seraphim every day. We talk about the angels.
The
burning angels, right? These are these high-level angels, and they swarm around God, right? Millions and billions. And they want to get so close to God. They get too close. They get too much of a revelation of the divine presence, and they burn up. And God creates new ones.
Like those little tiny gnats at the gas station in the summer.
Something like that.
Those really bright lights.
Something like that. And people are all excited about angels. It's like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. So that's exactly the idea.
Arnold Palmer, that's it, yes.
All right.
The
God
first
needs
fusion
to
of lemonade and tea.
God needs to limit and contract his energy. He needs to engage in this process of tzimtzum in order that we should be able to have a little bit of God's energy. And that little bit is enough that we could tolerate and appreciate it and learn with it and grow with it and have this like relationship, which is, of course, the point of all the creation, right? That God wants a relationship to live down here with us.
Yeah, this is just going a little bit aside, but I don't know about the rest of you. I can't help my mind but jumping to what God calls the new creation when he dwells with man.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to behold him it's going to be somehow different.
It's going to be different. So if you want to talk technologically speaking, what it's going to look like specifically, we know that when Mashiach comes, he's going to remove what?
The veils.
Okay. The klipa. There we go. He's going to remove the spirit of impurity from the earth, says the Bible, right? What's the spirit of impurity? What's the source of impurity? Klipa. Klipat noga, the shlosh klipat atamea, the three impure husks and shells. All sin, all impurity, they come from this source, originally energized by God's energy, fed by us every day, unfortunately. That's going to go away, right? It's like God's going to peel the fruit. And now we're going to be left with a beautiful fruit, right? Mm-hmm. So there will still be tzimtzum, but much less than we have today, right? Because today the tzimtzum, God's filtering, contracting his energy is so strong, that you could have stuff that doesn't even look like it's alive, right? When Mashiach comes, it says even the rocks will cry out, right? Or another way, you can have people here, so the tzimtzum is so strong, God is so filtered, concealed, and hiding himself so much here, you could have people actually deny that God even exists. Right. Which, of course, won't ever be a possibility in the world to come when Mashiach returns, yeah?
Which is really quite a conundrum. The creation denying the fact of the Creator.
Right. Let's look at that as a little case study, too. How does that happen? How could you have an atheist? I mean, let's not use any words. How could you have somebody who denies God?
Because he conceals himself so much that he cannot be seen.
Right. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, the truth and reality of all creation is that we're all plugged into God, very much like a movie projector is plugged into the wall or whatever, and that's the energy source. And if you unplug the movie projector, no more theater, right? Mm-hmm. God conceals his energy from us. What energy? The energy that's vitalizing us, right? Mm-hmm. He conceals that link from us.
The world and everything in it.
Right. So it feels like I'm not plugged in down here. I just got 2 feet, and I could send him wherever I want, and thank you very much. Have a great day, right? That's tzimtzum, right? It's very, very effective tzimtzum. It's so strong tzimtzum that we could actually have trouble seeing God. Mm-hmm. And again, that's important for a couple of reasons. One, so that we could actually survive and be able to tolerate it. But why so much tzimtzum? Why so much concealment? Because it adds merit to every mitzvah that we do. Every bit of tikkun olam that we perform, because we can't see the immediate reward, right? Remember our rewards in heaven? Because we can't see the immediate reward, therefore, the reward that we do get is going to be so much grander, because we're going to get to judgment, and God's going to say, you spend all of this time doing all these mitzvot and doing all of these different things for tikkun olam, and you never saw any reward for it. In fact, I gave you a flat tire, right? And you still did it anyways? What a mensch, right? But if God was, his face was in the sky, beaming at us all the time and saying, I love you so much, and by the way, I'm holding you up into existence, so you better not do what I say not to, would we have any reward for the mitzvah? Mm-mm. It would be less, right? It would certainly be less. Mm-hmm. All right, next paragraph. Now, as far as for the intricate details of tzimtzumim, this is not the place for their explanation. Again, we're not going really deep into the concept of tzimtzum. We're trying to describe it cursorily. Cursorily? Cursorily. All right, we're going to go over it real quick.
Right.
Again, if you are interested in looking more, there's a couple footnotes here. You could see Torah Or, Likutei Torah, and as well, you could look into the original doctrine of Tzimtzum by the original himself, again, penned by his students. But in general, they are the Tzimtzumim, the contractions, the concealments, are something of the nature of occultation and concealment, kind of like an AC current, right? That God is going to be sending his energy, but he's also going to be sending a secondary energy that's going to be concealing that energy, right? Yeah, it always makes me laugh. You look at movies like Ushpizin, or sometimes people, they're doing a mitzvah real quick and they're not wearing a head covering. So what do? They put their hand on their head real quick like it's a head covering. That doesn't work for us, right? We can't hide ourselves. God knows we're there. But that's exactly what God does, right? The only one who's strong enough to hide God is God. So with his right hand, he gives energy, right? Chesed. With his left hand, he hides it, right? He makes a cup with which to fill the energy. Mm. So in that way, that's how Tzimtzum works. So this light and vitality is concealed in this dual process, so that only an extremely minute portion of light and vitality should illuminate and reach the lower creatures in a revealed manner. Again, I think the parable for this is pretty good. If you have like a big light, like the sun or something, right? And God takes that big light and he focuses it into a laser beam, right? And now this laser beam is going straight through, there's a concrete wall with a tiny little pinhole in it, right? So you can see a little beam of light coming out of that pinhole. And then God puts a curtain in front of that, a thick curtain, and like 1,000 other little curtains. By the time it comes out for the end, it just looks like world. It doesn't look like godly divine light, right? Another explanation I heard from my teacher was the DWP, right, the Department of Water and Power. If you have unlimited, unbridled flow of water from the street, or from the pipes under the street, or of electricity from the power plant, right, and you were to put it into these light bulbs, what would happen? The electricity, not the water. The light bulbs would blow, right?
The electricity, not the water.
Right. If you had the main big pipe from the street and that was coming into your, you're trying to fill up your teapot, right? It would shatter the teapot. Well, or if you're using a glass one, I guess. But it would just be too much, right? We don't need all of that. We need this much. If you had unlimited, unbound fire and you use that to heat your teapot, you'd melt the teapot, right? We need a little bit, not everything.
A little bit, not everything.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Let's see here. So that only a very minute portion of the light and vitality should be able to illuminate and reach the lower creatures in a revealed manner, as it were, pervading them and acting in them and animating them, so that they might receive existence ex nihilo or yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, and be in a state of finitude and limitation. Again, yesh me'ayin means something from nothing. Everything comes from God, but God's energy for us is very concealed, so it seems like nothing, right? Excuse me. This constitutes an exceedingly contracted illumination, and it is considered as virtually nothing at all compared with the quality of the limitless and infinite illumination, which is why we've said many times before, and we'll say many times again, to God, the world looks like it's nothing entirely, right? We say, I know Torah, you know Torah, or you have $100 and he has $1,000, so he's more wealthy than this one. But for Bill Gates, they're both paupers, right? Mm-hmm. For God, okay, you have this little accomplishment. It's nothing compared to infinity, right? Mm-hmm. It's exactly nothing compared to infinity. and there is no reference or relationship between them, right? Infinite and finite are not related at all. They're two polar opposites. As the term reference is understood in values, where the figure 1 has a relevancy, the figure 1 is relevant with the number a million, for example. For 1 out of a million, 1 is 1/1,000,000th of a million, right? Or let's say 10 trillion, right? 1 is 1/10 trillionth of 10 trillion. So there's a relationship that you could put between 1 and a million, even though a million is very big and 1 is very small. That does not apply at all to finite and infinite, right? Does not apply at all. DNA does not apply. But as regards to a thing in which is the realm of infinity, there is no number that could be considered relative to it. For a billion or a trillion do not attain the relevancy of even the figure 1 in comparison with a billion or a trillion, but is veritably accounted as nothing. Understand?
So,
Yeah.
our life,
Mhm.
as compared to eternity,
To the life of God
zero.
is absolutely worthless, right?
It's like a vapor.
It is. It's zero.
It's absolutely nothing.
Before you know
Just
it.
like King Solomon said, it's like a vapor. So, what gives our lives value? This is good. I'm glad that you brought it up.
Mitzvah.
Mitzvot, exactly right.
Aha.
Because God said, I would like you to do my will. And by doing my will, you're going to accomplish Tikkun Olam, which is my ultimate purpose for creating the world as a whole. So you are a paramount figure in accomplishing my will, which is the reason I created anything at all, says God, right? Parable is used. They had like Einstein there, right? They had Einstein, and they had the schlepper guy who wasn't smart at all, right? And Einstein is working out all these very complex formulas on the chalkboard. He's falling asleep a little bit, so he says, please, I need a cup of coffee. Could you give me a cup of coffee or something? And the guy gives him the cup of coffee, and Einstein's able to continue scribbling away on the chalkboard. That guy contributed to Einstein's will, Einstein's plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that gives that guy value, whereas before it was nothing, right? Every mitzvah that we do is eternal. So that makes our life, which is finite, all of a sudden infinite, because God's will is infinite, and we've connected to God's will. Does that make sense? So indeed, is the quality...
Like the infinite improbability drive.
Like the infinite probability drive. Exactly right. Or, no. Close. Maybe. I'm not quite sure on that one. We'll have to look at the halacha and get back to you. So indeed is the quality of the contracted illumination which informs the higher and lower worlds, acting in them and animating them, as we'll soon see, compared with the quality of the hidden and concealed light that is of an infinite order and does not clothe itself or exercise its influence in the worlds to animate them in a revealed manner, but instead it's encompassing energy. How do you say encompass or surround in Hebrew, in Ivrit? Scroll down a little bit. Soviv, right? Soviv. When it says that you're going to take the blood from the offerings, right, and you're going to place them around the corners of the altar, right, you say Soviv. Make it happen all around, right?
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yep.
I thought of it on my own, though.
That's very good. Score a point for you for sure. So this encompassing infinite energy of God that does not permeate the world but surrounds and hovers above and encompasses and cradles the world, it's infinite, so it can't internalize. It's too big, otherwise we'd go pop. Is called the infinite stuff is called Sovev Cholamin, God's energy that encompasses all of creation. Whereas the energy that God uses that's limited, finite, went through the Tzimtzum process, that we're going to soon learn is called Mimale Cholamin, the energy of God that fills the worlds, right? If you're going to fill the world, if you're going to fill my cup, I need, how much is this? 8 ounces? 6 ounces? I need this much to fill my cup, right? If you put 2 gallons in my cup, it's too much, right? It's going to make a mess all over the place. If you put 2 ounces in my cup, it's not enough, it's not full. It has to be sized very specifically. So Tzimtzum has to be at play, right? But if you consider the encompassing energy of God kind of like the air in here, well, it's all around, right? There is no specific amount. It's everywhere. It's infinite. Again, God's infinite energy is not like air because it encompasses the whole universe, right? Parable is weak, but...
You know, but it's important to remember that even though God's glory, His light, is so minute in this world, contracted.
Sure, yes.
That the Bible says clearly, the glory of the Lord fills the earth.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So if that's just the glory, imagine the whole package, right? So we have this encompassing, hovering energy of God called Sovev Kol Alman, which literally means the encompasser of all worlds. And that's not to be confused with Mimale Kol Alman. Mimale Kol Alman is the energy of God which fills all worlds. God's encompassing infinite energy is not contracted. It doesn't go through Tzimtzum. God's filling energy is contracted. It does go through Tzimtzum because it has to be sized, right? Infinite is not sized. Size is not infinite. Meaning of this is that it encircles and encompasses from above spatially. That's not right. Oh, the meaning of this is not. There we go. The meaning of this is not that it encircles and encompasses spatially, chas v'sholom, because space doesn't exist in a spiritual reality, right? Space is only here for this physical world. So God's Mimale Kol Alman energy might be sized, but again, spatially doesn't apply. DNA does not apply. For in spatial matters, the category of space is in no way applicable. Spiritual, not spatial. As they say in Israel, right? Not special, as they pronounce it in Israel, but really spatial. Spatial. But the meaning is that it encircles and encompasses from above insofar as the so-called revealed influence is concerned. For influence, which is in the category of revelation, right? God influences us through his revelation in the worlds, is referred to as investiture, or being clothed within the worlds, for the influence that they receive is clothed and comprehended by them. Remember that was the main distinction before? Even though the angels are so big, metaphorically speaking, they are still limited because they can't understand God, because they can't receive God's presence to whatever extent. They can to a certain extent, but no further. That makes them finite, right? So also, the influence from God's revelation here, we receive it, it's clothed and comprehended by us, or all of creation in general. Whereas the influence which does not come within the category of revelation, but remains in this occultation and concealment, this infinite Sovev Kol Alman energy, is not apprehended by the worlds. It's not described as being invested in the worlds. It's described as encircling and encompassing. Okay? Have we beat this to death enough? Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Occultation, is that occultation?
It's like I think it's like a fan, oscillate, like it goes around, circles,
Okay, gotcha.
encompassing, right?
Gotcha.
From every side, another way.
I was trying to, because I saw a cult in there, and I'm thinking, what is this word?
No, the Hebrew word is...
oscillating, is, I got you.
The Hebrew word is soviv, which means encompassing, circling.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, since the worlds belong in the order of finite and limited, right? All of God's creation is finite and limited. It follows that only an extremely minute and contracted reflection of the flow of light of the holiness of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, the Infinite One, blessed be He, clothes and invests itself in them in a revealed form, and this is only to animate them in a finite and limited state, not in an infinite state. As our friends over at the center, they say, the 1% reality, right? Mm-hmm. God's energy that fills the worlds and makes us, okay, this is a cup, this is a table, that's a camera, this is a person. That kind of energy is the 1% reality. God's Sovev Kol Alman energy, the actual essence of the light, is so much bigger than what we could see, right? Mm-hmm. So much bigger. 99%. But the spiritual world is the 99%. That's what we should be connecting to, not the physical stuff, which is here today, gone tomorrow. Okay? Let's see here. Only to animate them. That's why God fills the world. But the principal light without contraction, to such an extent, is called makif, encircler, and sovev, encompasser, since its influence is not revealed within them, inasmuch as they belong to the order of finite and limited. Again, God can't squeeze his infinite energy into finite us, or we go pop. Make sense? Goosh. To illustrate this point, consider this material world, says the Alter Rebbe. The whole world is full of his glory, as Rabbi Tzala had quoted earlier. This is from Isaiah chapter 6. Namely, the light of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, the Infinite One, blessed be He, as it's written, do I not fill the heavens and the earth, says Hashem. And that's from Jeremiah. Nevertheless, only a very small vitality and the category of inanimate and vegetable worlds is clothed therein in the form of revealed influence. So we say the famous nursery song, where is God? God is here, God is there, God is truly everywhere, up, up, down, down, right, left, and all around here, there, and everywhere. That's where he can be found, right? This is very true, but we have to understand what that means, right? Certainly it's not God's infinite energy. It's not God's it's not God's infinite energy that we see filling all worlds, right? But it's the Mimalik Olam energy. It's this energy that God uses to fill all worlds. That's the bit that we see. But when we say that God is everywhere, this is his infinite nature, Sovev Kolaman. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Again, when we get energy from God in a Mimalik Olam form, where God uses his energy, sizes it, puts it through contractions, and then delivers a real product here that we could clap on here, it is going to be extremely finite and limited compared to the essence of God's infinityness, right? Mm-hmm. Which it is obvious. So we're talking, the Alter Rebbe here uses the category of inanimate worlds, or the silent world, things like rocks and vegetable worlds. They're clothed therein in the form of a revealed influence. That's what's revealed to us. You could see the rock, you could see the tree. It's while all the light of the Ein Sof Yisbarach, the rest of God's energy that's not revealed to us, is termed as encompassing, Sovev Kolaman, even though it actually pervades it. Because guess what? Infinite doesn't have limits, right? So you can't say that the infinite energy of God, the Sovev Kolaman energy, stops at the boundary of the world. God's infinite energy fills the entire world, right? No matter what it looks like. Hello. Hey, shalom. Hey.
How you doing?
How's it going? So, God's infinite energy fills the entire world. No, I think you're good. Let's see, where were we here?
Encircling from above, for the hidden world is on a higher plane than the revealed world.
There we go. Even though it's actually pervades it, since its influence is no more revealed in it, but it's active in it in a hidden and concealed way. Again, God's infinite energy we do not see. It's concealed. It's hidden. And any influence of a concealed nature is referred to as encircling from above. For the hidden world, this 99% world, is on a higher plane than the revealed world. So, let's use another example, says the Alter Rebbe. Let us make it more intelligible by means of a parable, an example. When a man forms an image in his mind of something that he has seen or sees, the way I heard it was like the Empire State Building. You see the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, whatever. It's this huge, beautiful structure, and you think about it, and then on the car ride home, you're thinking about the big, huge building, right? You got the building in your head. You're wrapping your mind around the building, okay? When a man forms an image in his mind of something that he has seen or something that he's seeing, although the entire body and essence of that thing, both its exterior and its interior, right? You see the building on the outside of the Empire State Building. If you go inside, you see what the floor was like and the elevators, and you see every room, if you went to every room, whatever. The entire body and essence of the thing, both its exterior and interior and its very core, are completely mirrored in his mind and thought. You got the whole image in your head. Picture further if you're like an architect. So you're thinking about all the details of everything, every window, every door, every light bulb, right? Everything that's going on. They're completely mirrored in his thought. For he has seen it, or he's seeing it at present, in its entirety. And this is expressed by saying that his mind encompasses that object completely. We have a very similar idiom in English here. We say, I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, right? I'm trying to get my head around it.
Very same concept.
Very same concept. And that thing is enveloped in his mind, by his mind and his thought. But it is not encompassed in actual fact, right? You can't say that the Empire State Building is in my head. It's still in New York, right? But at the same point, it's in my head. But it's not really in my head. I'm imagining it in my head. My head is wrapped around it, but it's really still over there. So that's different. Only in the imagination of the man's thought and mind. This is not true for the Holy One, blessed be He. Totally different. Totally different. For us, it's a separate thing, and we're thinking about it. For Him, for God, when God wraps His mind around something, when God thinks about something, it brings it vitality. It brings it creation. It brings it from a state of nothingness, from godly energy, into a state of revealed being. That's what God's thoughts are, as the Alter Rebbe says here. And for the Holy One, blessed be He, however, of whom it is written, for my thoughts are not like your thoughts, right? God says, I have thoughts, but they're nothing like your thoughts, right? What happens when God thinks stuff? Stuff becomes, right? Stuff gets created.
Creation is ex nihilo.
Something from nothing, yesh me'ayin. Surely, his thought and mind, knowing all created things, encompass each and every created being from its beginning to its end, from its inside and its very core, and all in actual reality. So, while we say, I can't possibly get my head is, fairly large. But I can't stick it around the Empire State Building if I tried, right? God could. God could, because God's infinite, right? And when God does that, it brings that thing into a state of creation, something from nothing. For example, In the case of the orb of this earth, which is pretty interesting that Judaism knew, that the Torah knew that the earth was round so many years before everybody else caught on. For example, in the case of the orb of this earth, his knowledge, Yisbarach, his knowledge, blessed be he, encompasses the entire diameter of the earth, all the way on the equator, etc., of the globe of the earth, together with all that is in it, and all in its deepest interior to its lowest depths, all in actual reality, right? God's mind encompasses the entire world, and again, by God thinking about the world, that's how he creates the world. But there's an extra step, as we'll soon see. For this knowledge constitutes the vitality of the whole spherical thickness of the earth and its creation ex nihilo. I'm not a highlighter, but if you were to be, I don't think that's a bad place to highlight. God's knowledge constitutes the vitality of the entire, whatever the creation is, from something to nothing, ex nihilo. However, let me just take a sip here. However,
You're not a highlighter.
I'm not, but I know that.
You're a highlighter.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. However, it would not have come into being as it is now, a finite and limited being, with an exceedingly minute vitality sufficient for the categories of inorganic matter and vegetation, rocks and trees, were it not for the many powerful contractions which have condensed the light and vitality that is clothed in the orb of the earth, so as to animate it and sustain it in its finite and limited status, and in the categories of, for example, inorganic and vegetable matter alone. So, what did the Alter Rebbe just say? The Alter Rebbe said, if you have God creating the world just through his thoughts. By the way, how did God create the world? We know how God created the world. The Word.
10 utterances.
10 words, 10 utterances. Absolutely right. Torah points are in. So God created the world not by thinking the world into being. That's not what the Bible says. It says he spoke the world into being. It says Yehi or, let there be light, Vayehi or, and there was light. Yehi Rakia, let there be a firmament, and so on and so on and so forth. Right? So God took what? What happens when you take a thought and you bring it into words? I'm trying to explain to you now. Let's change that parable. The Alter Rebbe is trying to explain to me right now, and I'm trying to explain to you right now, these words of our sages, right? These words of Torah. Is everything that the Alter Rebbe know on these words on this page?
No.
Not even close, right?
Right.
Not even close. What about me when I'm trying to explain it to somebody? Also not even close. I understand it in a way that's fantastic, whatever, but using language to be able to filter it from my mind into a packageable, something that you could relate to, is called what?
Cray cray.
Cray cray. Let's use that in Hebrew. Tzimtzum.
Oh, okay.
Tzimtzum. You're contracting it down from a lofty thought to a concrete word. And that's why, if God had just thought the worlds into being, they'd be infinite. But because he did Tzimtzum and spoke the worlds into being, therefore the worlds are finite and not infinite. Right? So that's the technology, I guess you could say, of how it works. Another parable I heard from my teacher, blessed memory, it said, using the parable of a teacher, right? You have a teacher who teaches college-level Torah studies to a bunch of good Chabadniks in Oxford, let's say, the top of the top, whatever. And he's going to explain things to them on a level that's, there's going to be lots of information, it's going to be super crazy, and they'll be able to take what they can get, hopefully, right? And if you were to give that same level of talk to elementary school kids or preschoolers, what would they be able to take from it? Nothing. It would feel uncomfortable to them, right? Because the light is too much. So they start getting antsy, and they'd start moving around, and they'd be playing with their phones if they have phones, and like all this other stuff. They wouldn't be able to tolerate the revelation. It's too great. As such, a good teacher has to take the information, the good knowledge, and break it down, put it through a process of tzimtzum, contract it, limit it, conceal it, refine it in such a way that I could say the words that are required for you to get the concept, and then nothing else, right? Mm-hmm. A good teacher says less. It's all about saying less and not about saying more. Because you can confuse people. You could overwhelm people. With too much light, with not enough contraction, you'll lose people. And then they're going to be, ADD and ADHD and everything else, God forbid.
Going to be numbers and letters and stuff.
It's
Yeah,
like
a
that
whole bunch of alphabet soup.
one Friday teaching, and you would kind of go all around and around, and then back around the block several times, and with this and that, and it was almost, that's why, like your dad said, it was hard to follow. because it was too much,
Right.
and it wasn't condensed enough.
It's not an easy job. Teaching is an art form, you know. And imagine being able to teach. We just celebrated Passover. 2 and 3-year-olds about Passover, what it means, is an incredibly difficult concept. How are you going to be able to explain it to them in a way that they can understand? I mean, God wrote the whole Bible in the language of man so that we could get an idea, and most of us don't get it at all.
He took me out of Egypt.
Right? They give us clues and tools and tips and stuff. But at the end of the day, we have to find a way to package that in a meaningful manner, you know? So, when God thinks about stuff, he creates it. But when God speaks stuff, he's contracting his thought into speech and makes it finite as opposed to infinite, right? But his knowledge...
But that process of mean isn't that simple, and it's not one contraction.
No, it's many, many, and quantitatively and qualitatively, as we said before. Many, many. But his knowledge, Yisbarach, blessed be he, which is united with his essence and being, for he is, and the Alter Rebbe quotes the Rambam here in his famous statement, he is Vehu Hamada, Vehu HaYodeya, Vehu HaYodua. He is the knowledge, he is the knower, he is the subject matter which is known, and knowing himself, as it were, he knows all created things, but not with a knowledge that's external to himself, like the knowledge of a human being. And again, this is a very difficult concept, but the Kabbalists agree with the Rambam, with Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides of blessed memory. He had said, you know, God is the knower, the knowledge, and the known. So God is the one who's understanding something. He's the one who's knowing something. He's the IQ and intellectual faculties by which something can be known. And he's also the subject matter which we're learning, which we're knowing. And the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe here too say, if you're confused by this concept, join the club. No one can possibly understand that.
Welcome to the
This is totally opposite to the way humans are wired, right? Everything we know is separate from us, and we have to go out there, figure out a way to learn it, and then acquire it and take it into ourselves. That's knowledge, right? That's how we work. For God, there is nothing outside of God. So by knowing himself, he knows every aspect of creation. Make sense? Because it shouldn't. But it kind of does. It kind of does, but not... there's more glory here than we can tolerate.
Right, but it's kind of exciting.
Right, exactly right. Not with a knowledge that's external to himself, chas v'sholem, God forbid, like the knowledge of a human being. For all of them, the created things, all of creation, are derived from the truth of his being, right? He is the cause of all causes and the producer of all effects. Yisbarach, may he be blessed. And this thing is not within the power of humans to comprehend clearly, and so forth. We have a note here. As the Rambam of blessed memory has written, and the scholars of the Kabbalah subscribe to his views, as is stated in the Pardes of the Ramach, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, blessed memory. This accords with the Kabbalah of the Arizal, and the mystery of the Tzimtzum, and the clothing of the lights in vessels, as has been previously mentioned in chapter 2. So again, essentially, the Kabbalists agree with the Rambam here.
Can you elaborate just brief
In a Tzimtzum type of way?
yeah, the clothing of the lights in vessels. That
Absolutely.
Was, given us way back in chapter 2.
Sure. I like the parable of Chesed and Gevurah, if you want to use that, right? If you say that Chesed is the giving, flowing forth energy, right, and Gevurah is the limiting, contracting energy. Therefore, God fills with the light and catches with the vessel, and that makes a real thing. And that's emblematic of pretty much everything in creation. We are a vessel that God made, and he put the soul into our body. That's like God's light into our vessel, which is more contracted, right? And so on and so forth. It goes on and on and on. And to the end of the chapter here, it says, this knowledge, since it is of an infinite order, it is not described as clothing itself in the orb of the earth, which is finite and limited, right? Again, God's infinite energy doesn't fill because it's not contracted. And God's contracted energy can't be infinite because it's been contracted, right? But as encircling and encompassing it, although this knowledge embraces the entire thickness and the interior in actuality. Don't think that God's infinite energy stops at the globe of the earth. Again, infinite means everything. But we're talking about revelation, right? The Malikulam energy from God, God's energy that fills all worlds, reveals stuff, makes real stuff. Whereas God's infinite energy, which is concealed, this is the 99% reality, which we don't see. Although this knowledge embraces the entire thickness and the interior in actual reality, thus giving it existence ex nihilo, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, is explained elsewhere. So again, in this chapter we learn about Tzimtzum. God can't just give us unbridled godly energy because we'd go pop. God has to give us energy through a finite, filtered, contracted, concealed manner that we could tolerate it in a way that we should actually be able to grow to a relationship with him as opposed to just be overwhelmed by his presence, right? There's no reward for doing a mitzvah if God's screaming at you from the sky to do it all the time, because we would not be able to choose otherwise, right? Tzimtzum enables free choice, because if there wasn't a wrong choice, I wouldn't be able to choose it, and there wouldn't be a wrong choice if God was more revealed here, right? So Tzimtzum enables free choice and reward and punishment, because again, if there was no wrong choice, how could you be rewarded for making the right one? That's just programming. That's not a choice at all. And that's Tzimtzum. And again, remember where this chapter is coming. It's coming in this big marathon of love and fear. This is to come and show us how much it is that God does for us, right? God does all this stuff, making sure that, and if you look at the earth, you know, we in the galaxy, the Milky Way that we're in, I'm not sure if you guys look into that kind of stuff, but we are in the exact, absolute, perfect possible spot we could possibly be in. The earth is in this cosmic shell of stuff, right, that protects us from all kinds of stuff, and that shell's in a bigger shell of cosmic stuff that protects us from all kinds of nasty radiation and stuff. It's exactly far enough away from the center of the galaxy so that we're not getting pulled into there and there's too much energy. And it's exactly not too far away towards the edge of the galaxy, so it's not too cold and we're not flying off the wheel here, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Everything about this world is exactly 100% perfect. God has to contract everything just enough so that everything should be able to survive and thrive and ultimately reveal him, which takes a lot of patience and a lot of care and a lot of hard work. So look at how much God does for us, which leads us into chapter 49, which is reciprocal love 2, which we'll find next week. This actually reminds me of a parable I heard from one of the women's studies of from Chabad, I believe it was. There was a certain lady, and they were studying in the prophets, I believe it was, and it says that God refines us in like a silversmith's fire, right? He refines us like silver. You've heard the story before, but one of the ladies knew a friend who knew a cousin who had a brother who knew a friend or whatever, and he worked as a silversmith. That's what he did. That was his job. So she asked, could I come by and see, kind of shadow you for a day and see what it's like. So he's like, absolutely, sure, come on over. She comes down, and she's looking at everything that he's doing, and he takes this lump of, it's like black, gross rock. She's like, what's that? He's like, this is the precious silver. It's like, it looks filthy, it looks like disgusting. He's like, that's why we got to purify it. So how do you purify it? Well, first you have to make sure that the fire is nice and hot, right? Everything has to be just right. It has to be super hot. And then he goes and he takes the lump of the ore here, and he puts it in the fire right in a very specific place in the fire, so that it's right at the exact perfect spot so that it shouldn't get too hot and it shouldn't get too cold. And she's asking him, what are you doing? And he's explaining exactly that. And he starts watching it intensely. He's looking at it very closely and very carefully, moving it just slightly every now and again. And she's like, what are you doing there? She's like, I'm waiting. He said to her, I'm waiting to make sure that I don't burn it, right? Because this is the most critical part. If it gets too hot, we're going to lose everything. And if it gets too cold, we're not going to purify anything. So we have to do it exactly this way. It's very particular, very careful. It's just like, wow, how do you know when it's done? And he's like, that's the easy part. When I can see my face in it, right? When I can see my reflection in it, that's how I know it's all purified and everything's ready to go. So in the same way, God uses Tzimtzum as a functionality with which he can make us seemingly sentient, independent beings that could develop our own personal relationship with him. Otherwise, we would just be like hairs on his arm. We wouldn't know that we were separate from him at all. We couldn't have any kind of dialogue or back and forth. Like, I don't have a dialogue with my arm when I do this. Right? So that's chapter 48. What do we think? Questions? Pretty good?
Can you say, Sovev Kol Almin is God's infinite light which encompasses all the worlds?
Yes, exactly.
And Male Kol Almin?
Mi Male Kol Almin.
Mi Male, okay.
Mi Male.
Would be his concealed light, which fills the worlds and gives it vitality.
I guess so. I wouldn't really like it like that, saying his concealed light, because his infinite light is far more concealed from us than his. I mean, the molecular element energy is revelation, really. But it goes through a tremendous process of Tzimtzum and Tzimtzumim, so that when it does become revealed to us, it doesn't overwhelm us. So I would say Soviv, infinite, surrounding and permeating, whereas Mimale, it's sized, and it causes revelation. It fills from within.
It's a concealed revelation.
It's a concealed revelation, just enough that we could tolerate it. Exactly right. But it causes revelation, so I would definitely have that word in there someplace. Very good. Any other thoughts? All right, again, next week we're going to be studying chapter 49. Chapter 49 is our second round of reciprocating love, reciprocal love. Again, this is Jacob's style of love, having compassion on God, seeing everything that he's done for us, and responding in kind. So that'll be next week. Anyone like to close with some prayer?
I will.
Okay.
Abby, thank you that you've given us one, that you've shown us in our lives that we can have the Tanya and study the Tanya. Thank you that you remove us from ourselves and fill us with you so that we can understand you and see you and know you better, to fill our lives more appropriately with you and more completely with you. Help us to always keep striving to reach higher and higher, just like the candle Jew. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Todah. Please join us next week for chapter 49.